Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of the Prime You series of interviews with top business and technology leaders. Today we are delighted and honored to welcome Greg Smith, a managing partner at Arthur D. Little, a multinational management consulting firm that is operating as a partnership across a number of industries. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Pleasure.
Well, my first question is about your distinguished career in consulting business. Can you tell us a bit more about your career trajectory and the steps that have led you to your current position?
Well, I'm actually not a career consultant. I spent the first half of my career on the client side of the fence as initially an accountant, which I wasn't very good at, and then as an IT manager and IT director. So it was nearly 20 years ago that I took the plunge into management consulting and technology consulting, having spent until that point all my career sort of buying consultancy, which was both a help and a hindrance. I think I probably overestimated how easy it was. I thought that these guys coming in delivering consulting projects, how hard can that be? And it turns out it was pretty hard, especially when you hadn't done it before. So yeah, my first venture into consulting back in early 2000s was with Capgemini, where I joined as a sort of what was called their technology leadership group or technology consulting group, which was sort of the consulting offering that sat in front of the classic managed services and system integration activities, and worked hand in hand with those to offer full range services to some of our clients. From there, I moved to a very similar role with Atos Consulting, another French-owned large managed services and system integrator backgrounded company. And it was quite interesting because literally, I think the second week of my Atos career, I won a project with a large logistics company that was about to acquire. So it was a B2C parcel business, and it was about to acquire a B2B parcel and courier business. And I did the technology and integration strategy for the post-merger, and then somewhat surprisingly, the chairman, executive chairman, who was also the investors representative, sort of asked me to be the CIO to deliver the strategy, which was a lesson I think all consultants could be reminded of, which is you've got to be careful what you say in a strategy because you might get asked to deliver it. Which was my role for the next nearly 3 years. It was delivering that post-merger strategy, and back being a CIO with a team and with lots of consultants working for me. So yeah, that took me through to, I think, just after the Olympics in London. I remember that, and I went back into Atos for a couple of years before, along with a colleague, we wanted to do something different, something based around what we thought were the emerging patterns of technology rather than some of the traditional enterprise IT best practices. So he and I joined Arthur D. Little to launch what was a new practice, which became digital problem solving. And I've been there ever since, where I still run the digital problem solving team, but also, as is common in consulting, you tend to pick up a new job every year, but you never give anything back. So 6 years in, I've got a number of hats that I wear.
Well, that's an impressive career. The part that you have just mentioned about consultancy being a challenging job. The digital transformation and innovation is the trend that has been there for many years now. So, what do you consider being the most challenging part of your business?
So I guess there's a couple of things which I noticed moving from a client role into a consulting role as being different. Let's be honest, there's a lot of things that are very similar. What works well as an IT leader and a client is still the core of being an IT advisor and digital transformation advisor in a consultancy, but there are some differences. I think the first is the context switching. You know, digital problem solving is by design not industry aligned, because we believe that things that work in one industry can often help unblock a problem in another industry. So we deliberately want coverage across as many industries as we can, because that, we think, provides more insight, but it also creates a challenge around context switching. You know, in any given day, you may be working with multiple clients in multiple industries and on opportunities in different industries, and of course, you know, the client rightly expects you to be expert because they're paying a lot for your services. So you know, the plate spinning to be expert in many things in quite tight timescales and be able to flip between them is something you don't experience in client side. You know, you've often worked for many years in your industry, you know it intimately, you know exactly how it works, you know what you need to improve, and that pretty much is your agenda, you know, for a period of time. It's not quite the same in consulting. The other thing, which is may sound obvious, is, you know, in doing all this good work and helping clients to solve their problems, you've also got to do it in a way that's you know, commercial for your organization. You know, it's sometimes the easiest thing in the world to go the extra mile to absolutely deliver an unbelievable result for a client, but you know, that has to be balanced with the bottom line that you're trying to achieve for your own business, which ultimately pays the bonuses of the staff that you're responsible for, and allows you to grow your business by making investments, and so, you know, it's that balance between, you know, doing a really great job for the client, but not going so far that it starts to directly impact your own commercial performance as a business, which is, let's be honest, you know, I'm a shareholder in Arthur D. Little. That's my primary responsibility, but I want to do that by delivering the best possible outcomes for the clients we work with, and it's finding that balance between being absolutely driven by the client need and also not losing sight of your own responsibilities to your business and your staff.
Well, that's very interesting and powerful insight you have just provided. Since you mentioned it's very important for your company to work with enterprises across industries, maybe you could tell us which industries are the most ready or the most inclining towards digital transformation.
Well, I think there's okay, that's quite a small question with quite a big answer. So, you know, our foundation, and one of the things, just going back to why we are multi-industry, you know, I remember reading many years ago a quote by a chap called William Gibson, and I'll probably remember it slightly incorrectly, but I think he said something along the lines of, you know, the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed, and that stuck with me, because what that means, and our practice is, you know, as we've described, called digital problem solving. That's what we try and do. We try and solve clients' problems using cutting edge digital techniques and technologies and approaches. And, you know, what we've found over the years is that if you know how to look and where to look, and you've got the curiosity, and you've also got a reference framework to be able to bring ideas from one context into a different context, you can often find a big part of the solution you're looking for has already been delivered somewhere in a different context, but with a broadly similar sort of pattern. And we talk a lot about patterns. So the first thing is, within any given industry, so let me take a step back. I fundamentally believe that every industry has got an opportunity to embrace leading edge, what we call digital, but leading edge technologies to drive differentiation or optimization or innovation. I'm sure there might be some, but I haven't seen an industry yet that I think is impervious to being able to be improved by the application of cutting edge digital technologies. Within industries, the variability within an industry is probably greater than the variability between industries. So in any given industry, there are some organizations, and it's still very few, who are absolutely figuring out how to apply digital technologies to innovate their business model and differentiate in the market. And there are probably a majority of companies that are really struggling to do that, even though they've had many, many years of knowing that this is, a key part of their future strategy. And, our challenge is often to work with those who believe that there is a breakthrough opportunity for digital transformation, but who, for whatever reason, are struggling to realize that opportunity. And, that's, I think, where consultants can add real value by bringing impetus and by bringing insights, and by bringing that sort of horsepower into a particular point in time. Now, if I was to look at which industries are more or less, I genuinely, I think I have that taxonomy straight in my head, and then I go and talk to someone in a particular industry that I think is maybe less impacted by digital transformation than some of the more obvious ones like telco or like healthcare. And you suddenly realize when you start to talk about their projects that the potentiality of digital is just as strong. It's just as high, and it's only your sort of maybe lack of understanding of what really makes that business tick that's made you think that they're less open to it. I remember when I was client side last in the parcel business, we used to have conversations between myself and the CEO and the chairman. And, it was like, well, what if we actually are an information business that just happens to deliver parcels? What if our primary purpose is not delivering the parcel, is managing the information that you need to make the best possible experience and to control the delivery and to optimize the delivery? What if that is a bigger part than the actual physical process of delivering the parcel? Well, it's probably an extreme stretch of the imagination, because clearly a parcel business is a parcel business, but actually the valuation of that parcel business might be driven more by its mastery of data and information than by what is perceived as a commodity, even though it's very difficult to do, a commodity process of actually delivering the parcels. And we've seen in the UK examples of online loss-making sort of retailers, grocery retailers, who have attracted incredible valuations because they're seen as an information business, not a food retailer. And it's just really, sometimes it's the worldview that you look at these businesses through that determines what they are and what they aren't. But I haven't yet, just going back to your original question, I haven't yet seen a market sector which I think is immune to being transformed by seizing some of the leading edge digital approaches, techniques, philosophies, and technologies.
Greg, on your website, I could see a framework for different investment strategies such as acquire, harvest, and scout. Could you please elaborate a little bit on these business strategies and how they can help modern enterprises to disrupt the market?
So I think like all consultancies, we love our frameworks, and we love to we love to parcel the world up into neatly defined categories. I think what's probably for me more crucial is, yes, you need the toolkit of approaches, of frameworks, of technologies and techniques. But what you also need is you need the understanding of the business and the ability to be able to figure out which tool to reach into your toolkit to use in a given circumstance. And I think sometimes consulting can become slightly too enamored of its frameworks and lose sight of the fact that just in the same way, a perfectly good tool used for the wrong job is not a particularly helpful tool. And you've got to know what to use in what circumstance. And I think often, and I see this a lot in the financial press. There is a perception that there's one answer, and for me, the context is often more important than the content. What is a perfectly smart strategy for one business might be entirely inappropriate for a very similar looking business in a similar market. It just depends on the context. And I think when consultancy works well, it's because it combines the rigor and the frameworks and the approaches with both the context and the creativity. So the creativity to know what's the right blend of things that you can bring to bear, and the awareness of the context to know, well, what's actually, yes, we know that generally this industry sector is suffering or is being impacted by these trends, but what specifically is the context for the company that I see? And it may be that those macro trends are impacting it, but they're not as significant as some of the micro trends that are unique based on that context. And I think that's the challenge. It's knowing as much which tool to use as having the best toolkit, and the curiosity to look at the specifics rather than just think about the generics. I once did an interesting project for in a transport company, and it was to do with punctuality on a rail system. And it just brought home to me that the specifics can be crucial. And it was an example of delays on the network caused by disruption to the services, the rail services. And they gave two examples. And one example was where they had a problem. A driver hadn't turned up to take the train out. They had to call in the replacement driver. That replacement driver had dropped everything. It wasn't his shift, but he agreed to do this extra shift. He jumped in a taxi. He got to the station. He sort of ran down the platform, got into the train. The train left 2 minutes late, and there was zero disruption to the train service, no delays, because that 2 minutes happened to be within the tolerance, and so there was no impact on any rail service. A few weeks later, an identical situation happened, and the same call was made. I don't know whether it was to the same train driver or a different one, but the same process was followed, where that driver agreed to do this extra shift. They called a cab, they jumped in it, they got to the train, dashed into the cab, took the train out. That caused a massive knock-on disruption on the network. Two things there. this is a classic example in a complex system of the butterfly, flapping in the Amazon, causing the hurricane wherever, because it was a tiny change. And when they looked at the causality of what caused that slight delay between a 2-minute delay and a 4-minute delay or whatever it was, it turned out to be one temporary traffic light on the journey from his home to the railway station. 2 weeks before, he'd had a clean run, he got there in 2 minutes and taken it out. This time, the same train, the same call made at the same frequency, got stuck in a temporary traffic light, missed that slot, ended up going 4 minutes late, massive knock-on effect across the whole area network. And it just, that to me is an example of, we think there are these generic solutions to industry problems. And there are, and we should be absolutely aware of them, but then we need to interpret them into the specific context, which may be more powerful than the generic context. And sometimes you can end up giving different advice and recommended different solutions to what could look superficially to be the same problem. But that's because the context is different.
Greg, there are many different consulting companies, and probably they have similar frameworks and similar tools they're working with. So what would you define as your key differentiator at ADL?
So I guess it's, I'm a biologist by background, so I sort of still tend to see the world in biological terms, and I think you've got different ecosystems, and different species, so may thrive in one ecosystem but be predated in another, and it just depends. And it's the same in consulting firms. There's no one good and one bad. It's like it depends on what you're trying to do. If you've got a well understood problem with a well understood solution, then what you really want is a company that's delivered that well understood solution many times and knows exactly the steps to go through to successfully deliver what is not an identical product, but is a similar product with many shared steps. And a lot of the consulting industry is geared around that type of, customized solutions based on a common core of standard, sort of background. And in a lot of circumstances that can work really well. As I say, if you've got a well understood problem and you've got a well understood solution, that's the right approach to go. And often that's the model that can scale. So if your expertise is implementing SAP in manufacturing, there's a lot of manufacturing companies. A lot of them want to put SAP in. I'm using an example that's probably a little bit out of date, but that's a very big market. And you can grow quite a big team that can be very successful and be highly proficient at doing that sort of project. We're not that sort of company. We tend to work with, especially in digital problem solving, which I can speak for, more specifically than Arthur D. Little as a whole. We're attracted to the unique problems. We're attracted to the problems that don't have an obvious solution, and where when you start the project, you might not even know fully what the solution is, but you know how to find it and what the components might be, and then you've got the experience to be able to assemble those into something that can solve the problem. And in that model, scale isn't really your friend. You really want small, highly experienced, very skilled teams who can bring different elements and different backgrounds and different experiences. And you probably have a different ratio of early career consultants to senior and experienced consultants, and we tend to use a lot of external senior experts as well. So in that sense, our model is more like maybe a a law firm, where you've got a relatively low ratio of consulting staff to partners, and the partners are very much hands-on in delivery as well as in the commercial side of the business, and that is great if what you want to do is work with hard, unique, complex problems, and so that's where we tend to specialize. Those things that are maybe non-obvious and require an experienced, multidisciplinary, maybe multinational team, and we're good at pulling those together because of our organizational structure, and we're good at deploying those into clients, and we're also good at having an open mind at throughout the project and listening to external and client input as part of that process, and I think that's where we've carved out our niche. That's where our species lives within its ecosystem, and that's the niche we inhabit. Now, I wouldn't say that's better or worse than some of the other models, but it's different, and I think that's how we do differentiate from some of the maybe the more technology focused, purely technology focused, or much larger businesses, which have to really build upon big foundational pillars in order to get their scale.
Well, with this, you have a bit preempted my next question, which is about your team and the team members that you're looking to bring to your company. So if you could elaborate a little bit about the skill set and type of personalities that you actually want to be part of your company that will help you to deliver on the promise.
So people who are fundamentally curious, who, finish a project and think, if I did that again, what would I do differently? Don't say, oh, if I win that project, I know exactly what to do. Say, actually, if I get another chance, I'll change these things because the world's moved on. And so you've got that slightly, restless spirit and curiosity and openness to ideas, and I would say intellectual flexibility. So something that you believe strongly. If evidence points to there being a better way, you're happy to say, well, I did believe that, but actually I've seen something that works better, and now that's what I'm going to. And that's sometimes that's not easy, because if part of what you are moving away from is what you've built your reputation on, then that can go quite deep into people's identity. But ultimately, we want the people who are curious and intellect. The other thing we want is people who have got both the humility and the ability to work as part of teams. The best thing is when you have really smart people from different backgrounds who accept that the other people in the team are just as smart as them, but know different things, and they've got the humility to know when they're providing expertise and when they're asking for expertise, and they don't feel uncomfortable at that two-way flow. So that's something we look for. And then we also, a really big part of our model is what we describe as open consulting, which is knowing that we don't have access to all the skills we might need. So knowing how to partner with complementary people or complementary organizations to create a single team, which might be composed of multiple different organizations, but working to one client goal, and being able to, manage across boundaries, and lead across boundaries, because it's often as much about setting the vision for the open consulting ecosystem to align around, and then letting everyone get on with their particular specialism.
Well, Greg, I really like the part where you said about curiosity and about being humble to understand that you probably don't have all the necessary expertise and knowledge. Therefore, you should be able and feel comfortable reaching out to other experts working in the team. And also the part where you said that as an organization, you provide an example of that principle because as you might not have all the expertise, you still feel comfortable reaching out to other complementary organizations that will help you to execute on the strategy that you have helped to build to your client.
Yeah, the only time we have all the experts is if it's a relatively small project. When you get to the larger projects, I can't remember an example in the last 5 years where we haven't partnered with specialists to deliver that that outcome that the client's looking for, and we do that in a very transparent way. So we take full responsibility for the deliverable, but we don't hide the fact that we're working with open consulting partners, and we allow the identity of that partner to also be part of the engagement with the client, whilst standing in front of the deliverable, because obviously what the client's looking for is that someone has got accountability for delivering the solution. They like the fact that the best experts and the best skills are being brought in, but they also want to know that they don't have to manage 5 different stakeholders within the project team. They want to know that, okay, ADL, you're delivering the solution, therefore you're the people who've taken the accountability. But I like the fact that you've assembled this group of experts and specialists.
Greg, maybe you could share a good or interesting example or a case study of a problem that you have helped your clients to solve, or a transformative project that you have built.
Yeah, let me think of a good example. I need to think of one that's sufficiently generic, not generic, but isn't immediately identifiable to the client. So okay, I'll give you a good example. So we were contracted by a mass transit operator in an Asian city, and the travelers on the transit system were very demanding. The tolerance of delays was very low, and it was in a part of Asia that was impacted by tropical storms and typhoons, and one of the big causes of delays, unavoidable causes of delays, was trees falling onto the line, and causing disruption to the service. And the question we were asked was, using artificial intelligence and machine learning, is it possible to predict which trees are going to fall on the line and therefore take preventative action? Now, theoretically, that sounds like a good question. It sounds like it might be the case that AI and machine learning can find some patterns and insights that humans alone can't find. So we thought this is a good challenge. We like this one. This is the sort of problem that we get interested in. And so we started off, and not surprisingly, we started with historical data from the clients as to which trees have fallen and why and when and what might have caused it. And we looked at survey results that they had from assessing the trees that grew near the tracks that potentially could cause a problem. And so we had an amount of internal data from the client. We also looked at what the current regime was in terms of trying to take proactive action to avoid this, and actually we found that wasn't a very good way of identifying which trees might be a problem. We also realized that it was going to be very, very difficult to say this tree will fall over, that tree won't fall over. So because you can't be that deterministic in your planning. What you can be is probabilistic and say, we think there is an increased likelihood that in this sector of the track, you will have a disruption event caused by a tree falling. So if you've got limited resource, we would recommend that you prioritize these segments of track, and that's where you focus your efforts on trying to do preventative maintenance. We also, as we got deeper into the problem, realized that there were many, there were many dimensions to this problem, and not all of them were to do with the data that was available to the organization. And you can imagine how, as you get deeper into the problem, you need to start considering things like topology and geology and soil types and atmospheric conditions and microclimates and a whole host of things. And in the end, I think we ended up layering probably 15 different external data sets into the model, which was effectively a model that took a graphical representation. So, one of the things we did was to use a modeling technique that most closely matched the physical environment. And then we used an experimentation technique to look at, when we start to add new data sets, some internal, some external, which do we see add value to our predictive model or a future-looking risk model, and which seem like they had they might work, but actually showed no correlation. So there's then this experimentation of saying, I wonder if when we use this data set, that gives us an insight. I wonder if when we combine that data set with another data set, we get some insight. Oh, actually, we thought that was promising, but it turned out not to be useful. And these 5 layers turn out to be the things that really help pin down the probability of where a tree falls. And then, of course, you go through the classic AI experience of training your model on historic data to try and see how well it's tracking to reality. And yeah, it wasn't a huge project, but I think it epitomized some of the themes that we see. Individual context, combining internal and external data, taking an intellectual curiosity, applying a sort of scientific experimentation approach, testing your hypotheses, not being too precious about thinking you have the answer, letting the data speak, and then pulling all that together into something that was usable. So we talk about augmented decision making, the combination of smart technology and smart people making better decisions, leading to better outcomes. And so, a key part of the project was, as well as coming up with the smart AI and machine learning to build the model, was then how do you interpret that into a dashboard and a decision framework that means that people make better decisions? The smartest model on the planet is no good if no one can understand it. So you then have to translate that back into the world and the context of the people who are tasked with making a difference on the ground.
Well, actually, this is a great illustration of something that we talked before, where using the right tools, and in this case, using the right tech stack of AI and ML, and interpreting the data can help the business to avoid some losses, right? Removing the fallen trees or predicting where these trees can actually fall can help the business in fighting their major obstacle in delivering goods on time. So that sounds like lots of work for your team.
Wait, actually, it probably would have been a lot more work a few years ago, but it's amazing how the the technology wrappers that have been developed, help shortcut some of that heavy lifting that you'd have done only a few years ago, and some of the techniques and the algorithms and models that are available to you out of the box, almost a bad choice of phrase in a digital world, but they've made it easier, but it's still a significant challenge. But it brings together, that mastery of data, there's different skill sets, the AI, the experimentation, in quite a neat way, I think.
What technology stack are you looking to invest into to be able to continue to deliver a truly differentiated offering?
So we've got a few elements to that. So firstly, we have to be technology agnostic. Going to that point that there may be specific context, that specific context might be a particular technology that a client has invested in, made a significant investment in, and that they're looking to exploit that investment. And so, notwithstanding, is the technology capable of doing the job, which we need to be able to demonstrate, we may not get to choose the particular flavor of technology that is in use. It might be that's a pre-existing decision that we have to work around. We believe if it's our choice, though, we tend to lean heavily on open source, not just because of the cost, but also because that's actually increasingly where the development effort is going into. If you look at the amount of development going into some open source platforms, and then you look at the equivalent development going into a proprietary commercial product, it can be a factor greater or even more. So, where's the smart insights being applied to create the digital technologies? So we tend to favor open source if we can. We're not, as I say, we're technology agnostic, but we tend to be using a lot of AWS tooling at the moment, simply because there's a lot of it, and there's a big landscape of technologies that you can call upon. We have our own data science platform that all the data scientists collaborate on, a product called Domino Labs, which is useful in that it creates an environment where we can, we talk about data science as a team sport, and part of that team sport is the ability for the data scientists to be able to interact and share code and see each other's code and help each other, and so Domino Labs provides that environment for us. And then I mean, we are absolutely passionate believers in trying to use the leading edge of the technologies that are available, and we tend to avoid, if it's our choice, we tend to avoid some of the classic enterprise IT technologies, because we just don't believe that's where the innovation is, and that's where the notwithstanding the cost premium, we just don't think that's where the smartest solutions are.
Well, I like the part where you say that you are technology agnostic unless the client has invested in a certain technology stack that you'll have to work with it to help the client build their solution around the stack that is already in place.
And then that comes back to the context issue, which is, sometimes you have to work with the context you've got. The other thing that is important about being technology agnostic is things change. What might have been the leading technology 4 years ago may not still be the leading technology.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you built a solution using technology A 4 years ago doesn't mean that you should automatically use that technology now, because the world might have moved on, and we've got, even in just the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen, examples where our go-to technologies have been superseded by better offerings that, and if we're there to offer best advice, we need to be able to reflect that. We can't, which is where the curiosity comes in. You need to be prepared to, even though you think you might know the answer, you need to be prepared to keep the curiosity to say, well, I think I know the answer and I've got experience. Let me just check to see what's happened in the last 3 years, and maybe the world's moved on and I need to just do a quick refresher.
Well, I really like it. I like the part where you say that anybody working in technology or in consulting should be able to check and reflect their past experiences and see if they are still relevant to the present. Greg, what other lessons can you distill from your experiences of working with enterprises and helping them hit the reset button on their development?
That's a good question. We tend to try and not hit a big reset button if we can. Mm-hmm. We tend to say, from where we are, how might we move forward? Now, sometimes clearly there are examples where you have to redo something that isn't gonna succeed. But more, I think what's more satisfying almost is when you're able to take what's there but change course and put it on a better course to success, and augment that. So maybe if you find yourself in a situation and you're blocked, well, okay, what's my path out of that? And in traveling that path, can we create a better path? Can we add to it? And actually, can we sort of, rather than stopping and changing fundamentally, can we get to the same end goal but do it through evolving into it? So we sometimes jokingly talk about strategy as a verb, not strategy as a noun. Can you build your strategy one project at a time? Can you use your activity to actually move you towards it, rather than the sort of the historic way of, this is your strategy, now let's execute on it? It's like, well, your strategy isn't the thing. It's not a noun, it's a verb. It's constantly adapting and changing and evolving and responding to externalities. And so, can you create a system whereby the sum of your projects, the sum of your decisions, can move you towards your strategic objective, rather than saying, right, okay, we need to stop, figure out what the answer is, then we need to radically change direction. I'm not saying that sometimes there might not be cases where you need to do that. Clearly there will be, but I think more often it's about evolving your way out of your current situation into a better one that's aligned with where you're trying to get to, and your goals and your mission. Yeah, I remember many years ago, sort of reading Eric Ries's Lean Startup, but when it came out, and that was quite, that to me was something that was really stuck with me, because it articulated what I felt and was seeing in clients, and but hadn't seen in the strategy literature previously. It sort of it almost was like, in a world of Michael Porter like sort of frameworks and models, and then along comes this sort of lean startup approach, which says just do something, learn from it, figure out whether it works. If it does, do more of it. If it doesn't, do something else. And but keep that keep that learning loop, keep that iteration, keep that evolution, and because and also be prepared to accept the things that you can't control. You might think you've got a brilliant idea for a product, and you might be right, but if someone you're not aware of introduces a very similar product 3 months before you do, you better adapt to that, because if you don't, you're not going to succeed. There's no point in saying we've got a good product and we're just going to ignore it. It's like, well, but your customers aren't, and the market isn't. That's out there, that exists. You need to adapt to it. Now, your product might be better, or it might be differentiated, or it might be more sophisticated, or it might target a different demographic. That's fine. But figure it out, and don't ignore the fact that this other thing exists, because that's just a dumb strategy if you do.
Well, Greg, this is a very powerful insight, and I cannot imagine a better note to end on our conversation. So, thank you so much for your time and for your lessons. I believe our listeners will find them invaluable. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.